This week, Conflict Zone is back in the Ukrainian capital, Kiev, asking what happened to all those promises of political reform and the fight against corruption. My guest is the Foreign Minister, Pavlo Klimkin. With Western countries becoming more and more impatient with his government, what can he say to reassure them? Pavlo Klimkin, welcome to Conflict Zone.
Welcome to the country fighting the Russian aggression.
Thank you. When it comes to your relations with the West, let's talk about that for a moment. When it comes to your relations with the West, you've been promised now visa-free access to Europe. The IMF has restarted funding. When are you going to live up to your promises?
What kind of promises?
Like battling corruption, for instance, like the reforms, like the things that Joe Biden told your president about in no uncertain terms a couple of weeks ago.
Look, if you see what is going on in Ukraine, and I mean it also personally, not just the foreign minister, so we delivered definitely more in recent 2 years than in recent 20 years, and not only in the sense of creating the system of tackling corruption, and not only in the sense of someone arrested practically every day, but the whole mentality actually started changing, and you can feel it.
Well, the view from the outside world is rather different, because Biden said very angrily, and he warned your president in the strongest possible terms, he needs to start living up to the promises of economic and political reforms, or risk seeing the EU countries, and he spoke about 5 countries, ready to walk away from sanctions on Moscow if you don't live up to these.
No, not at all. let's not mess it around, because I was in the last meeting between our president and Joe Biden.
Where he said, straighten up and fly right, didn't he? He said, straighten up and fly right.
Sanctions is about Russia waging the war, the hybrid war against Ukraine, having occupied Crimea and having actually occupied Donbas. And sanctions are here about to get Russia out of Ukraine. Reforms, it's our point.
Is that what you think the sanctions are doing? Because they show no sign of doing that whatsoever.
Look,
sanctions have not achieved anything in terms of changing the situation on the ground, have they? So how long do you want these sanctions to go on? Because European business and American business are taking a hit to continue with these sanctions.
Firstly, sanctions should be there till Russia is literally out of Ukraine. And I believe in people and countries making free choices. And it's your choices of Ukraine becoming a real success, and it's what we must deliver in order to survive and to get our success.
But you think
it's also a point of your credibility and moral authority. And if you let Russia to attack independent country, you open up a Pandora box which would go to you nowhere, and you should understand
that. Your prime minister went further. He said in June, countries that support, countries that support the removal of sanctions will turn into the aggressors' accomplices. How helpful do you think is that to label people who want to remove the sanctions as aggressors' accomplices?
It's not about labels, it's not about emotions.
He applied the labels. This is your prime minister who applied the labels.
My point, we've been enjoying the real international solidarity, and it's the first time in the history of the European Union, and I mean it, that the European Union has credible and understandable policy towards Russia. And we needed actually aggression against one independent country to get this policy. And now it's our common turn to get together and to deliver and to sustain the international system based on rules.
You might sustain the sanctions if you lived up to the promises that you made on corruption and reform, which the Americans and the Europeans insist you're not living up to at the moment.
Not at all. Actually, if you follow anyone from the US and from the European Union in the sense of reforms and in the sense what has been done, I personally believe it's it's quite sustainable.
U.S.
And
Commerce
I mean, it's not
Secretary,
just
U.S.
success.
Commerce Secretary
Yes?
Penny Pritzker, just a few weeks ago here in Ukraine, said the same thing. She said you need to step up anti-corruption efforts and other reforms. You need to take action now.
I fully agree. I saw Secretary Pritzker, and we are not at the end of the road. And if you believe we can transform actually systemic corrupted country in 2 years in a kind of European democracy, is great.
In 2015, there were fewer people sentenced for corruption than in 2014. Fewer people. So you're going backwards.
If you like to try statistics, it's an important point. But if you see statistics now, and someone arrested practically every day, if you see the system of tackling corruption in the sense of anti-corruption bureau and a special anti-corruption prosecutor, and what is going on now, and the whole reform of national police, and the whole idea of getting Ukraine backwards, I never, and I mean it, I never as a minister heard it from everyone.
But Transparency International here in Kiev says we're always hearing assurances that Ukrainian politicians want to fight corruption. In reality, the opposite is true.
Quote me someone who said that Ukraine is going backwards on reform, because it's an absolute personal point for me. Either we believe and we do it, we deliver on corruption and on tackling corruption. And it's not just about corruption. It's about getting more transparency into the system. It's about total reshuffle of justice system. It's about total reshuffle of national police.
Okay, well, here's what your people think about these so-called reforms. The International Republican Institute conducted in May, June this year a poll which showed that 71% here believe the country is headed in the wrong direction. Asked what would make them change their mind, 46% said abolish the immunity of MPs and judges.
Oh, I am all for it.
So why doesn't it happen?
Because we need a kind of political consensus for that, and it will be done.
So you don't have a political consensus. You don't have a
you.
consensus for moving forward then?
Look, not at all. Actually, yesterday we have the whole bits of institutional amendments now in force. And the whole idea of reshuffling the justice system is there. So it's one point. And the next point, it will be about immunity. I'm personally a big fan of going even further. But you need the national consensus there, and you fight for that.
Minister, people were asked in the polls if they thought various state institutions had become more or less corrupt in recent years. 76% thought the prosecutor's office more corrupt. 73% said the courts were more corrupt. 75% said the tax administration was more corrupt. You tell me you're moving forward. The people are telling you you're moving backwards.
Not at all. And
well,
I'll tell you why.
Speak for themselves.
Because it's about level of expectations. It's about understanding what should be done. I personally have an extremely, high level of expectations. And everyone has delivered on this level of expectations. And it's completely different from the time before. But in the sense of going forward, it's definitely the case. And you see it on concrete examples.
3 out of 4 people, 3/4 of your people, don't think they can get a fair trial. Of those who made a request to the court system, 34%, over 1/3, said officials either asked them for a bribe or expected one. You proud of that?
I'll get you another point. Before, under previous regime, and I remember this opinion poll quite well, we had just 4%, imagine 4% of Ukrainians having trust in Ukrainian courts. Even under any kind of emotional twist on what you gave me, it's completely different situation. So in this, and if you, quote any kind of confidence in Ukrainian police now, and before, it was about 5% of people trusting Ukrainian police. Now it's about 50+%. Does it make a difference?
It's not encouraging, is it, when this year a whole bunch of reformists, officials and ministers have resigned? Let's take the former Minister of Economy and Trade, Aivaras Abramovicius. Resigned in February, claiming that executives from the president's own business empire had been cementing their grip on power this year. He tried to clean up state companies. He found resistance. He said, that's when my problems started. So much for cleanup. You had the former health minister, Alexander Kvitashvili. We've been hindered by the system, he said, that's been cemented for 25 years, and now it's trying to knock out reforms as an alien body. How encouraged are you by this?
I'm absolutely encouraged what has been done on state enterprises in the sense of real reforms.
You seem to be living in a different universe.
No.
From these people.
You seem to quote from different sources because I'll tell you
I'm
two
quoting
simple
from
points.
reformists who've resigned in frustration and despair at the situation here.
And I know reformers, and including the deputy ministers in our Ministry of Economy, who have been working consistently on transforming the whole way how the state enterprises are governed. And in the same way, now, the whole system of healthcare is guided by, Ukrainian of U.S. descent. One of the ladies I respect so much, and the depth of her reforms, it's amazing.
Let's take the case of Vitaly Kasko. He was a reformist lawyer appointed to run internal affairs in the prosecutor's office, as you know, trying to find out why prosecutors were ignoring obvious cases of corruption. He says there's an unstated agreement. The prosecutor will look the other way if it's in the interest of the leadership. He said lawlessness, not the law, rules here in Ukraine. Lawlessness, not the rule of law.
And now, with all kinds of reforms, supported actually by the US and European Union, and US team working with our new prosecutor general, and it's actually the best confirmation that it's going forward. And it's exactly my point.
Going forward, nobody's been jailed for the murder of more than 100 demonstrators in 2013, 2014. Not a single corruption case relating to the previous Yanukovych Rome regime has gone to court. Not a single case. And the government says up to $40 billion went missing, and you haven't brought a single corruption case to court, and you're telling me you're moving forward.
Look,
the facts don't back up your assertion.
They brought not just one corruption court, but in the sense of Maidan, it's indeed a very emotional issue for every one of us. They've been working on that. It's about thousands and thousands of people now questioned and investigated. And I'm completely confident, and it's also my personal point, that what happened on the Maidan will be not just cleared, but all who were behind the strategy will be brought to justice. And now
people aren't as confident as you. We have the president of the Kiev School of Economics, Timofey Milovanov. He said nothing changed. The same elites are there, the same oligarchs. The disappointment is very widespread. Is he wrong?
Disappointment.
Is he wrong?
Absolutely. My point is very simple. If you take the level of expectation of many, many people here, it's enormous. My level of expectation, it's enormous. And I would do far more than it was possible. But the commitment of the people here in the sense of reform, it's also enormous. And I would be ready probably to come up with a sort of set of proposals and set of new ideas.
When it comes to corruption, why don't you just come clean and say it's too entrenched here? It's going to take years to root out this corruption. There are too many oligarchs in positions of power who need to be bought off because you need their support in the fight against Russian-backed rebels.
Why Russian-backed rebels?
Why? Because they have control, because the oligarchs control a lot of the power in the southeast of the country, in the east of the country, in the Donbas region.
No, it's total rubbish. We are ready and capable to fight against Russia ourselves.
Really?
And absolutely. And
so when Milovanov says there are prices the new political establishment has to pay, how do they pay? They guarantee some security for their opponent's business interests. In other words, you buy them off.
No, just explain me what is behind your point on some oligarchs bought off in the sense of fighting against Russia. For me, it sounds somehow crazy. The point is the following one. Look, Ukraine was indeed a systemically corrupt country, and we have to be honest on that. And we had basically three levels of corruption: the high-level corruption, a sort of corruption in the civil service, and routine corruption.
And it's still one of the most corrupt countries in the world.
And it will take some time to root out corruptions, no point about it. And you have to be honest, it can't be done in 1 month and 2 months, but in the sense of what has been done already, you can't deny it's simply going the same as for example, 2 years ago. In the sense of systemical change, I told you, it's not just about the system of tackling corruption, it's about new national police, it's about completely transparent electronic register, and everyone can come down there, and not about paving the price.
And what about the infighting in the government? I mean, we had a remarkable visual illustration of it in December last year when two of your officials, the Interior Minister Arsen Avakov and Mikhail Saakashvili, governor of Odessa, started shouting, hurling insults at each other, thief, bastard. Look, I mean, they threw water at each other, didn't they? You actually
see myself.
You actually got hit with the water.
So I was quiet. You can see me as a beacon of stability in the government. So
and what about the rest? Are you proud of this kind of performance?
It's all about emotions. For me, it's all about commitment of the people.
It's a brawl of people showing up very nasty divisions in the government, doesn't it?
No, not at all. You know, transforming the country and fighting against the Russian aggression, you need to be emotional, you need to be committed. And for me, either you have this team and we have the team here.
They hate each other. They were calling each other thieves, clowns. They were calling each other names across the table.
Internal politics is...
The president was powerless to stop it. You saw the picture. You were there.
Internal politics could be entertaining, but for me, politics could be effective.
Okay, when we're talking about reforms,
okay,
the G7 countries recently wrote to this government about another concern, the situation of foreign journalists in Ukraine. In particular, they looked at a website called Peacemaker, Mirotvorets, that has close ties to members of your government, recently put online the personal details of thousands of Western journalists and technicians who had been accredited to the separatists in the east of the country. It put those personal details online and labeled those journalists terrorist collaborators against your commitments and against your law, but these names have stayed up on the website. Why don't you do anything about that? This is incitement to violence, isn't it?
No, not at all. Not from anyone here, not from anyone from here in Kiev. And in the sense of freedom of speech, Ukraine is an amazing example of that. But
you've ignored the protests from the G7 governments over this. You've had clear protests.
My position was crystal clear. My position was 100% clear.
What?
That you can't put personal details of many who are actually Ukrainian friends. But you should understand the people here. You know, someone going to terrorists in Donetsk and Lugansk and registering there is seen by someone here, is not someone fighting actually against the Russian aggression.
Minister, it's a bit more serious than that, isn't it? Because the British Foreign Office wrote to you of their deep concern at the website and said it contravened the spirit and the letter of Ukrainian law, which states clearly that personal data can only be publicly released with the individual's consent. It also contravenes Ukraine's international commitments. So I ask you, following what the British government wrote to you on behalf of the G7, why you take no action against people who break the law in this country?
There was a very clear message from us in the sense of saying that it was not appropriate. And thirdly, in the sense of explaining what was behind that. I've just told you.
Your Interior Minister said, war is war. A friend sincerely fighting is far more important for me than the opinions of liberals and latent separatists. So he sees nothing wrong with this website. You say you've condemned it? You say it's...
No. He said very clearly that publication in this sense was not appropriate. But in the sense of other activities or of relevant websites, it was a completely different point by him.
Your foreign partners aren't buying your explanation. They've protested against this, and you've ignored it.
Well, myself, I voiced very clear position on
The website is still up and the names are still up, and the G7 believes it's illegal.
Look,
End of
my
story.
point again, it's my commitment and our commitment to freedom of media. And it's fundamental for this country. In the sense of how to interact with terrorists in Donetsk, Lugansk, it's a point which should be discussed with us. In the sense of what has been done by this website, my point is inappropriate. So clear position is there.
Why do you block the path of the special monitors who are supposed to look at any site in Ukraine? Why are they being blocked? Why are inspectors from the UN Convention Against Torture, Committee Against Torture, why were they prevented from doing their job in May this year?
Not at all. It's all a kind of speculation because I myself was involved in talking to relevant agencies.
They were forced to abandon their work in Ukraine. You know that.
No, not at all.
They were.
You're not right. No, don't speculate on that.
I'm not speculating. This was from the UN.
No, it's
A four-member team from the UN subcommittee gave up investigating reports of abuse by your security service, saying you had failed to cooperate.
Not at all. And I was personally involved in this case, and now it's fully settled. And I'll tell you why. We have a relevant legal provision on how they should operate in Ukraine. And the point, they can't access everything, what they can't access.
Why can't they access everything?
No, because of security concerns.
You signed the optional protocol which allows UN inspectors to make unannounced visit to any detention center.
Absolutely.
You signed the optional protocol.
And it's our
Why did you
commitment.
sign it if you're not going to follow up on it, if you're not going to do what's necessary?
But the access should be granted according to this protocol. I recommend it to simply to read the protocol to the places where the people, where there is a suspicion the people could be tortured or they could be handled improperly. And it was not the case in the sense of understanding what kind of places they could access. And it was a security concerns. But after, a sort of additional consultations, we definitely settle it up.
Right.
And you can ask further what kind of problem they could face now or they've been facing now.
All right, Minister, I want to just talk briefly about Minsk 2 before we finish. There was huge disappointment.
There is no Minsk 2. There is just one Minsk.
All right, there was huge disappointment in the West when your parliament failed to pass a constitutional amendment giving virtual autonomy to the separatist regions, which was a key condition of the Minsk agreement. This paragraph 11, which was to have been adopted by the end of last year. Is the Minsk agreement dead as far as you're concerned?
No, not at all.
But you haven't moved forward on it? You haven't lived up to your promise?
And we are not going to move forward on that.
So it is dead. In reality, it's dead.
Minsk is simple and easy if you want to implement that. We have fundamental difference with Russia on how we understand Minsk. Russia wants to legalize Russian protectorate in Donbas, and for that, they need firstly the voting, and after that, getting Russia out of Donbas and getting the OSCE to control Donbas, to get real security in Donbas.
Germany says both sides must perform in this agreement. They reminded you both sides must perform.
Definitely. But my point is simple. Either we have fundamental level of security there, and we have Russia physically out in the sense of Russia regular troops there, Russian weaponry there, and after that we don't have a kind of
After
Russian
that you'll come
protectorate.
around to moving forward on the Minsk agreement. Only after that, is that what you're saying? This is your condition now.
It's
This
my
is a new condition.
It's my fundamental point.
You're making it a condition.
It's not a kind of condition, it's my fundamental point. Security should be there and Russia should be out. in order to get Donbas back into Ukraine, and I mean Ukrainian Donbas into Ukraine, and not create again a kind of great and big Transnistria.
Okay, so
which
for
could
now
blow
Minsk
out.
is dead.
Not at all.
Okay, all right.
If you look, if you start speculating that Minsk is dead, it's about avoiding a kind of further process and avoiding EU commitment. So I understand this point, and I understand this point by many in the European Union. But I'm glad, and I would say even I'm happy. There are a lot of people who are committed to real Minsk and to fighting, the Russian aggression, how we have it in Donbas.
All right. Minister, thanks very much for being on Conflict Zone.
It was a real pleasure.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.